Okay. So yeah, thank you everyone for joining. I'm Alex Silver with the New York City Department of Health and Mental Hygiene. Before we get started, just some quick notes on accessibility and logistics. Hopefully you can see the slide on the screen right now. If you find it helpful, you can turn on live captions by clicking CC, closed caption, and then show captions. You can also choose the language for your captions by clicking the up arrow next to CC. But I apologize, I'm just saying that in English, so I don't know if that's useful for anyone, but we can do that. You can have captions in another language. Please do let us know if you need us to speak louder or at a slower pace. I know I tend to speak very loudly, but also very quickly. So if if you need me to change, let me know. I will say I am not going to be speaking most of tonight, so never fear. If you have a question or a comment, and I hope we do have time for questions at the end of this presentation, please place your question in the chat. One note, attendees will not be able to share video or audio. When we answer any questions from the chat, we're also not going to use any names to protect attendee privacy. And finally, this meeting is being recorded and we do hope to be able to share it later. All right, let me stop sharing my screen now. And
Okay, and then
we'll dive in. I just wanted to say a few more words. I'm sorry, Anamarie and Claire, and then I'll turn it
no,
over to you
go for
guys.
it.
Um, yeah, I just wanted to note, welcome. Welcome to Interacting Safely with Dogs. Of course, many of us in New York have dogs, and if we don't, we are still running into them, living in close proximity. And understanding how dogs communicate and how we can interact safely is important for everyone when we live in New York. So I am delighted that we're joined by Claire Cario and Anamarie Johnson, two wonderful dog behavior experts who have graciously volunteered their time and expertise to make this webinar possible. They'll share a bit about their backgrounds momentarily. First, why are we having this now? You may know, some of us are dog people on this call, that earlier this month was National Dog Bite Prevention Week, but also earlier this month, the New York City Health Department released what's called a vital signs report, a publication uh, with health data. This one was on dog bites. And I'll put in the chat in a moment a link to this vital signs report in case you'd like to read in more detail. And I know Anamarie and Claire will get into it a little bit. But this report showed that reported dog bites to New York City residents were at a 10-year peak in 2024. This is similar to nationwide trends of non-fatal emergency department visits due to dog bites, which have been increasing since 2021. That being said, dog bites are likely underreported in New York City, even though the reported ones are going up. So we can all play a part in preventing bites, and whether or not you have a dog, we're glad you're here. The New York City laws, I just want people to be aware of if you do have a dog, and you probably already know this, but just to be sure, you have to have your dog on a leash that can't be any longer, I'm sorry, than 6 feet long. Did that make sense? You can't have a dog on a leash that's longer than 6 feet. Dogs also must be vaccinated against rabies. And of course, owners must have a dog license for their dog. More information for that, if anyone isn't aware, is at nyc.gov/dog license. I'll also put that link in the chat so you have that information. And now the much more fun stuff, I'll turn it over to Claire and Anamarie. Take it away.
All right, so I'm gonna share my screen. Everyone can see that. I'm gonna give, I think you just got assigned as well, Claire. So we're good. All right, hi everyone. I am Dr. Anamarie Johnson. I am a certified applied animal behaviorist as well as a certified behavior canine consultant. I am currently based in New York City. I have previously trained private clients in the New York City area. And I operate a shelter behavior consulting company, Access to Behavior Consulting. And if you ever want to contact me, you're more than welcome. That's my email. And then I have the lovely privilege of being joined by my colleague through many iterations of many different careers. Claire, she wants to introduce herself.
Hi, New York City. I'm so happy to be here. Yeah, Anna Marie and I have been jumping around New York City animal welfare, from sheltering to private training. I have actually been in animal welfare since 2001 in a variety of different avenues. Like I said, I've worked in sheltering. I have a master's in psychology and animal behavior, certified professional dog trainer, and fear-free certified trainer as well. Currently, I have my own behaving consulting business here in New York City. I also work in Delaware with a training facility down there, and a couple other things that I do. I work with a couple different organizations as a consultant as well.
So we can get into the next jump. So oops, let's go back one. Can we go back one? There, ooh. There we go. All right. So we are going to kind of parse this out into kind of three parts. And as we mentioned, we are going to have time for questions. So please feel free to either stack your questions in the chat or break them down, whichever you would like. So first, as Alex, kind of teed up for us, we're going to briefly talk about dog bite statistics in New York City. Then we're going to talk about kind of how to read dog body language. And then importantly, kind of encapsulating all of that into what the research has shown for New York City, and also dog bite prevention and body language of how to keep yourself and others safe. We'll have time for questions, as I said, and then we have a slide on different resources, both locally and remotely on online websites that you can look up to get more information about any questions you have for dog behavior or navigating dog questions that you have. Okay. So, as I said, part one, dog bite statistics. Okay. So, as you can see in this chart, and sometimes you can get the little doohickey up, where I can annotate. Haha. Let's see. Can I annotate? Let's see. Are they going to let me do it? Maybe. Maybe not. But haha, victory. See, this is a fun and enticing game for everyone. So as you can see, dog bites are up in New York City as of 2024. So obviously we're in 2026. We gather information as it comes. But we're essentially at its peak for 10 years. This is important to note. This is looking at the rate. So per 100,000 New York City residents. So essentially this is saying that there was 45 reported dog bites per 100,000 individuals in New York City. Given that we are a highly dense area, you can understand that. The next chart on this side is basically doing that same rate, so number per 100,000 residents, but it's looking at it based on your borough. So this is important information to have if you are either traveling across boroughs or you're locally based. As you can see, per 100,000 residents, actually, Staten Island is our chart topper with the highest rate of reported dog bites, and followed by the Bronx, and Brooklyn and Queens, or Manhattan and Queens, are kind of tied. And then we have Brooklyn at the bottom. I think and Alex maybe can confirm for me, I think Bronx had the most bites, but they have a higher density, so it changes a little bit. But this gives you a good context for frequency of bites that are happening across the city and within our boroughs. Again, as Alex noted, what is really key here is that it's probably only looking at the small fraction of the bites that are actually occurring on a daily basis. Not to scare you, just for context, right? These bites are being reported when people are going into medical offices. But even the information from the medical offices, it looks like Alex was going to chime in. Even the information from those medical offices is not always being reported. So there's really a lack of good quality information, as we talk about from the research perspective, that is coming in from our city. And it's not for a lack of the city.
Thank you, Anamarie. Yeah, no, I just wanted to flag that Queens residents had the highest number of reported dog
Oh,
bites
okay,
each
sorry.
year,
Yeah,
but as you said, Staten Island had the highest rate, and the Bronx had the largest increase,
okay.
in the rate increase over the years. As you can see,
Thank
it
you for the
jumped. And
clarification.
again, I will add just again, the vital signs link is now in the chat, and you can see this was put together by many of my colleagues at NYC Health. So thank you to them for all their work on that. And I'll turn it back over to you.
Awesome. Um, so this is just important information to have when you're being aware of how you're navigating city streets and how you're navigating both dogs that may live in your home, ones that you're visiting, or maybe that you come across on the city streets. And then I'm going to turn it over to the lovely Claire that will be giving breakdowns on dog body language.
Great.
Oh, let's
Thanks,
see if we can get
Anamarie.
rid
Oh,
of
yeah.
that annotation. Let me get rid of
This
that.
is
Send you a
also what I
little bit.
refer to as the fun part, I must say.
Yeah.
There we go. See, I did that very efficiently.
Awesome. Thank you. Thanks, Anamarie. All right. So I apparently, there we go. Just a little delay. Okay, great. This is the fun part. And actually, I think really important. And why it's important to have a really good understanding of a dog's body language is because that's their primary mode of communicating with the world, right? That's how they communicate with one another. That's how they communicate with us. And here's the thing, you know, as humans, we're very species specific in terms of how we see our world, which is understandable, right? Because we're humans, and the dogs are the same, right? So a lot of times we miss a lot of really low level communication signals that dogs will give. And we're going to get into some of those a little bit more in a few minutes. But it's these low level communications that are so important, because if they're not heard, those low level, I'm not feeling comfortable, I'm fearful, I'm scared, they're going to start saying things louder, right? And then get pushed up what's called the ladder of aggression, which I'm going to break down at the end of the body language. But the point is, why is it important? It helps us to understand how they're feeling in that moment, right? In the context of that moment, what's going on in the dog's brain, right? And so the body of a dog is going to tell you how they're feeling. Obviously, they're not going to have a conversation with you, but it's going to give you a really good understanding of what is going on for them. And it really is going to help if you have a dog who is showing some of these body language concerns, and you're like, oh, I don't know if they're comfortable in this space. Perhaps we can avoid doing things like bringing them to the farmer's market if your dog is cowering and shaking behind you. And it can also help prevent situations from arising, right? So if you are, you know, I'll use the farmer's market again, you're walking through the farmer's market and you see a dog who looks very, you know, uncertain and scared, it's best to kind of give that dog a little bit of space. So the body is really important to look at. And what is more important is we have to look at the whole dog, right? Not just one part of the body. I find a lot of people may just look at the tail, which we're going to talk about in a second, or look at the hackles when they're raised and then just assume what it means. But you have to look at the whole body, from the nose all the way to the tail, from the back all the way to the feet. The whole thing is contextual, and each body part is connected to the other, right? It's all one animal. It's one individual animal. Right. Just look at that tail for a second. I put this one first because I hear this so often. Oh, but he was wagging his tail, you know. Yeah, oh, a dog wagging their tail certainly can mean that they're really friendly and they're happy-go-lucky dogs, but this is not always the case, and it often is not. It's often a sign of other things that are going on in the dog's brain, right? So the position of the tail, the tension of the tail, is it a loose wag or is it a stiff wag, right? So all of these contexts are so important in really getting to the emotional response that's happening in the dog's brain, and thus, you know, what to, you know, how we should communicate with that dog, right? So a low, kind of loose waggy tail is usually indicative of a dog that is feeling pretty good about themselves, the environment, what's going on, and they're just kind of hanging out, right? Um, the tension, right? And so this is, I'm going to go back to these, these two terms, loose and tense, as we move through other body parts. But I want you to hold on to those two things, right? And think about your own body. And when you're feeling happy and go lucky and confident, you're kind of loose, right? You don't have tension in your shoulders, your jaw isn't tight, your back isn't starting to ache. Because that's what stress does, and fear and anxiety, that's what it does, right? So think about that when you see a dog that is tense. That's the same thing that's going on with them. When you see tension in a dog's body, there's something that is happening in their body to make them feel tense, right? So I think that's really an important thing. If you struggle with reading dogs' bodies, that's the first thing. It's like, does that dog look relaxed and loose, or is that dog a little bit tense and stiff and not and kind of rigid, right? So same thing with the tail, right? So a high tail that's moving, right? It's wagging, but it's really high and there's some tension in it, is not necessarily a dog that is feeling happy-go-lucky, right? And so it really also depends on what's going on in the dog's direct environment, right? A tuck tail, I think that's one that a lot of humans understand, means this dog is feeling really uncomfortable in this situation, right? So this particular picture, we have a lot of information going on with these two dogs when they're greeting, right? The smaller dog is just, his body is really low. That tail, you can't even see it. It's tucked, almost touching his tummy. And the other dog is kind of really kind of stiff, not, tails up. So it's a little bit of a conflicted posture, I would say. But I wouldn't be too, I wouldn't say that both of these dogs are happy right now, right? So this is kind of a situation where there's more than one thing going on. But if we're just talking about the tail, that little guy is real scared. He's feeling uncomfortable with the presence of this other dog. And the other dog is just feeling a little bit on the edge as well. Okay, now let's just look at the body, right? Just the body. When I say the body, I don't mean the whole thing. I mean the carriage, right? So the big, the carriage of the dog. Like, what is the body doing, right? Again, we're going to go back to this loose concept. Of a relaxed and happy posture, right? Both these dogs, we can say these guys look pretty happy, right? Loose and wiggling, lots of movement. They may curve to one side. That's something dogs do when they greet one another. They do it when they greet people as well, is they don't come in directly. They come in nice and kind of like to the side, a little bit as a C. They may offer one of those play bows that you probably have heard about, big stretches, just to kind of, markate, hey, I just want to come over and say hi and greet you in a really friendly way. So these are really happy dogs for the most part. Again, right? We want to make sure that we don't assume that this is that dog all the time, right? That's getting a little bit deeper into behavior. And all those other things. But again, the environment matters, right? Just like us, we are different in different environments, and so are dogs, right? So when we are, hanging out with our friends, having a nice meal, we're relaxed and calm, right? But if we're rushing and going to the airport, what happens, right? We get a little stressed and tense, right? Same thing for dogs. And I think we have to remember that dogs are different depending on the environmental context. Even the ones that are happy-go-lucky all the time can find certain situations to be a bit overwhelming. So now we're going to switch into looking at the carriage in the tense world, right? So we have these dogs in these pictures. They're very alert to things that are happening in the environment, right? Square stances, forward stances, very front orientation, right? Dogs, if they're standing and facing front, that's pretty direct. That's not a normal kind of like happy dog. They usually are a little bit off to the side. Again, tenseness, stiff. A stiff dog that freezes, that is an early sign of, hey, I am really uncomfortable with something right now. It's a hard thing for your typical dog owner or dog lover to see. But it is really, really key and really important, again, to kind of learn some of these low level dog communications that often go missed. And so then we kind of get to a situation where I don't know what happened. It came out of nowhere. Often dogs will give us those clues and communicate their discomfort with certain situations way before they get to the higher level escalations of, you know, of barking, lunging, snapping, biting, things like that, right? So here's another tense thing, right? But this is getting smaller, right? These dogs are getting making themselves very small. They're very fearful, right? So as cute as these little puppies look, these are puppies that we also need to give some space to, right? It is the human nature to kind of coddle and comfort something that is seems like it needs help and it's scared. But it's hard to explain to a dog that you mean good, right? You mean well. I say a lot of bites that come from extremely fearful dogs, right? Because they get pushed over their threshold. Because, you know, most of the time people just want to do the right thing. Like, oh, this poor puppy is, you know, seems really nervous and scared. Let me go down and comfort him. And really what he's asking is for more space. So trying to move away, trying to get small. Some dogs, this is a big one that a lot of people miss as well, or they think it means something else when it's not. Is a dog rolling over and offering their belly. It can be a dog looking for a belly rub, but again, it's context based, right? So it could also be a sign of, can you please back off, right? In the dog world, we call that tapping out, right? They literally are like, I am so done with this situation. Please go away, right? So a lot of dogs' communications are so subtle and we get so confused by it when they're just asking for more space, right? They're just like, I just need a little bit of space from you. Right, those pretty eyes. Again, we have our loose and our tense, right? So loose, relaxed eyes, you know, the big puppy dog eyes of, hey, you know, sometimes they're called soft eyes. You could even, there's some where they squint. That's like usually like a really kind of like super happy, like golden retriever squinting. But just some relaxedness in no tension in the face, right? As opposed to some of the more stressed, fearful, and aroused eyes, right? So the dog that's laying on the bed is giving what we call a hard eye. That's a hard, direct stare. And if you've ever had a dog look at you that way, you feel it. You feel it, and you know, and it doesn't feel comfortable. And the mouth as well is tight and tense. Again, you know, looking at the whole body, but also paying attention to each individual piece of the body. Tension, right? The eyes are really hard. They're staring at you. The mouth is tight and closed, right? These fearful eyes and aroused eyes, right? When we see something, when we see the whites of a dog's eyes, that's called a whale eye. That is again, a low level sign of, please give me space. Please back off a little bit. I'm feeling uncomfortable with whatever is going on in the environment, right? Wherever that is directed to, that's the thing that they're feeling uncomfortable with. All right, piloerection, right? So what's going on with that fur, right? We see this a lot, and I often hear it. People say, oh, the fur is raised, the dog is aggressive, right? That is just not the case, right? It certainly could be. That dog could be aggressing, right? It simply is the dog is feeling some type of arousal in the environment, right? The biological process is similar to like us, you know, when we get goosebumps, the hair stands up, right? So this is what the body does. Like the dog is starting to prepare for something, some kind of emotion that is happening in their body, whether it's fear, distress, tension, or just excitement, you know, like I see a squirrel. Ooh, that's exciting. Or I'm at the beach. Yay. And that's all it means in itself. Right. But again, you have to look at what else is going on in the environment around the dog. Why are those hackles raised? You'll see this sometimes when two dogs greet and it's not a very kind of like, it's a little scratchy greet and they're like, I'm a little uncomfortable with you. And so they kind of go their separate ways and the hair goes down. So again, it's important to know all these things and then try to put them all together. So you can be like, what is this dog feeling in this moment? Right. So, okay. So this is, there are a lot more pieces to the dog's body, but I didn't want to go all the way into everything. I just wanted to give you a basic overview of some of the most important ones that we felt that a lot of people see first, and some that people maybe don't quite understand that they have multiple different kind of meanings, again, based on the environmental context of what's going on in the dog's world in that moment, right? Behavior changes, right? It is very gray. A dog's emotion response changes, just like us, every day is different. Every situation is different. All right, the ladder of aggression. This is really, really important because I think this is where we get, where dogs get put in positions that they are not heard by humans, right? And I'm not blaming owners or non-owners or anybody. It's a human thing. Just because we're humans, we're not dogs. And it's important to recognize these really low level kind of warnings that I'm starting to feel a little bit uncomfortable with what's happening, and I'm going to communicate it. Dogs read this from each other amazingly, right? They are master observers, and a really well socialized dog will respond to a simple little nose lick, right? A little lip lick. Another dog's like, okay, I'm gonna give you some space, right? Real subtle little things like that, and it's so amazing to see it when it happens. But these kind of low level ones is where, we want to make sure that we're paying attention to these, because if we're not, think about it. If you're not heard and you're feeling uncomfortable, usually what happens is we start to say it a little bit louder and maybe not as nice the next time. And then if you're still not heard, then you might start saying it a little bit louder and a little bit not nicer. And that unfortunately is what happens with dogs, just because they're just not being heard by the humans. So then we get them pushing up this ladder over time, and they start to get up to the top, right? They start growling and snapping. Those are some high level warnings. And I think what happens sometimes is sometimes they're heard, right? But again, then the behavior is working, so the dog's going to keep doing those behaviors. But also sometimes the dog is kind of like considered aggressive, or I don't know why this happened, and meanwhile the dog probably has been trying to say, I'm uncomfortable doing this on a regular basis, I'm uncomfortable with this situation, and at some point they're going to get pushed up that ladder of aggression. Right now, does this mean every dog is going to go all the way up these steps? No, not necessarily, but every dog does have the possibility of biting. It's part of their natural behavioral repertoire, right? All dogs have the possibility of going up this ladder. And it's our jobs as responsible dog owners, dog lovers, to kind of really pay attention to what they're saying. And this goes all across the city, in everywhere, especially like if you're, working with other dogs, if you're like in a dog park or something like that, that's really important, because a lot of times those things get missed because there's so much going on. But just keeping your eyes open and paying attention to your dog, if you have a dog, and being really responsible. And also paying attention to other people's dogs, and the behavior that you're doing in and around other dogs. It doesn't mean to walk on eggshells, but just be aware that your behavior, just like it influences other humans, it influences the dogs in the city. And I'm going to send this over to Anamarie to kind of talk about how we can try to stay safe, and also keep our dogs safe as well.
Yeah, and one note on the ladder of aggression. I think this webinar is meant to educate and keep you aware, but also like we're not meant to like create like the fear of your dog. or your friend's dogs in this, right? And so it's important to be aware of all of this. And if you see, like, I don't want the ladder of aggression to become something that like you are just like constantly monitoring. So, for example, it's not a 1-to-1 ratio. If your dog yawns and you continue with something, it doesn't mean they're necessarily going to immediately go to, turning, right? Also, it's really important to be aware, just like with humans, we have different tolerances and thresholds for certain things. I'm not a huge fan of going to loud, crazy parties. I would probably, if I was a dog, bite. But I think
Hey, everybody
it's
note, do not invite Anamarie to a
no,
loud,
don't
crazy
don't invite
party.
me to a loud crazy party. But so dogs are going to have different tolerances, and that takes into effect genetics and history of socialization and all that kind of stuff. So some dog, you might see them and you're like, oh my god, like how is that dog coping in that situation? The dog seems totally happy, and it could be, right, because that is the personality of the dog. So these are general guidelines of things to be aware of, especially if you're not familiar with the dog. It's always better to err on the side of caution. Um, but this all takes into account different styles and personalities of the dog. Okay, that being said, okay, so how to stay safe. So this goes back to the statistics that were pulled from the Department of Health. Um, so this is looking at reported dog bites based on what the person reported they were doing at the time that they received a bite. Um, and it's key to note that if you do look at the vital signs, one thing to highlight is that this is only of the dog bites that were reported, they only got 76% of information that is accumulating this chart that you're seeing. So we're not even seeing 100% of the actual activity engagement that was happening with the dog bites. And you can see pretty clearly, far and above, um, the human was engaged in what is defined as a passing behavior, which is basically entering or leaving a dog's bubble, as we will discuss earlier, later. Kind of their zones that they were in, right? It could have been on a walk, it could have been walking past it in a home, any of those kind of situations. This is good information to have because it means that many dog bites potentially could be mitigating by, especially if you're in a home environment, giving your dog their own space, right? Or if you see your friend's dog and being like, it looks a little uncomfortable, like maybe say like, your dog might want to go in the bedroom, take a nap. Especially if they're additionally showing those signs of stress or discomfort. The next far fewer behavior that was happening on the chart was what they're called handling. So that is defined differently as petting, and that's key. So handling, we can kind of think about as a little bit more invasive towards the dog from the perspective. Petting is much more in a positive standpoint of the person was likely engaging with, in their mind, a positive interaction with the dog. Where opposed as handling was like the dog was being physically manipulated. Think of a vet's office, think of a groomers, being moved or restrained. So those are kind of those two physical sides of things of where dog bites were happening. But you can see that in most contexts, it wasn't necessarily that petting. It was a much more invasive form. Important to be aware of both, though. Then you can see the breakdown of playing in this vital signs report was essentially playing with or near a dog. So think about in a park environment, thinking about with kids. Separating means that you were, again, that's physical manipulation. You are separating the dog from another animal or protecting from another animal. Resource, that goes into this concept of kind of resource guarding, right? Where the dog likely had food, bone, space, a person next to it, water, anything like that that they deem of value. And it's all up to interpretation from the dog. So that is key to know. And a lot of times that is key to know with personal dogs, right? So if you know your dog is okay with food, but not good with chews, you probably don't want to have your dog have chews around if people are going to be walking in or around its area that is a visitor. Stationary means waiting, sitting, lying down, or standing. So kind of they were, again, maybe in their proximity a little bit. And other was broadly defined as accidental interactions, like you accidentally fell on the dog. Not ideal, but it happens, and it is important to note, right? We might not be able to manage those situations. And again, every dog has a propensity to bite, especially if it's getting tripped over. And so it's like kind of these general scenarios that maybe don't fit into the other categories. So this is all good information to have as kind of a broad framework of how we can then move forward in trying to keep ourselves and others safe. So we're going to move to the next thing. So we've kind of chunked this out into kind of like 3 scenarios. So let's see, are you going to go? So this is, see, that's this. There we go. Oh gosh, in heaven. Let's go back. Giving you all the spoilers. Okay, so keeping yourself, my goodness, keeping yourself safe outside. So we're thinking about this from the perspective of it's a lovely spring day and you're out and about and there's dogs around, right? So on a whole, Claire and I will always be, we will always be the conservative side of things. So err on the side of caution. Just don't engage with dogs that are on walks or in stressful situations. Again, we go to this idea of the farmer's market. If you are at the Union Square Green Market, we all been there on a Saturday. It's crazy. Think about being a dog that is just literally having so many smells of food and deliciousness, other dogs around, and then at being at ankle or knee height. It's very, very overwhelming. Bags are probably getting thrown in their faces. Everyone is all around. That's an extremely stressful environment. It's probably not going to help the situation if you bend down and touch a dog, especially if it's just standing next to you in the line and might not even see you coming, right? Err on the side of caution. You can look from afar. You can smile. I do that all the time. I'm sure people, if you've seen me on the street and I smile weirdly at you and your dog, it's me. But that's okay. I'm not getting in that dog's face, and it's okay. Also, give yourself space if you're passing a dog that is on a walk, especially if you're coming up from behind them. That handler and that dog might not hear you coming. They might not be cognizant that there is another person around. And we don't know how a dog in that environment is going to respond if you sidle up right next to them. That can be pretty alarming. Think about, again, from a human perspective, it's kind of weird if someone all of a sudden sidle ups behind you when you're on a walk in the park, right? We want to be cognizant of those scenarios. We also, as much as we all want our fellow dog owners to be great handlers, that's just not the reality. And so, you know, sometimes they might not have a great grip, or there might be elderly or older or have kids with them. So we all have to be mindful, and it doesn't just because they have the dog on the leash, leashes can slip. Again, I don't say this to be scary. It's just to err on the side of caution. So just give a wide berth if you have that availability. Also, please, 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 because this has become my pet peeve. If you are on fast moving items, think bikes, think scooters, think electric scooters, please, please, please either get off if you are moving through a park or a street. If you happen to be on the sidewalk, please, please, please get off, or give a wide berth, right? I was walking my own foster dog, and I usually can hear bikes. This guy happened to be really, really silent. And I usually take a preemptive approach. If I see a bike coming, I will shorten the leash or offer her a treat. She is occupied and not wanting to lunge. And the dog all of a sudden darted, and I had a good handle on my dog, and he apologized and I apologized, but there was no way that I could have anticipated what could have happened, and that could have ended poorly for both of us, right? So be mindful of yourself if you're on these things. Again, these are very, very scary items for dogs. And they can elicit lots of reactions that owners might not even anticipate in certain moments. So an owner might never have quote unquote seen this behavior before, and might not anticipate it. So be proactive for yourself. Okay, keeping yourself safe inside. So this is really, really important as well, right? So again, this is where we come in these things about body language. This can be in relation to your own personal dog. This can be in relation to visiting a friend's dog. Be your own advocate in these situations. If you're thinking that your dog's not uncomfortable and doesn't want to be pet, just tell your friends, I'll say hi to them later or whatever, right? Be your own advocate. Totally fine. If you do have to handle or interact with a dog, offer a treat. I will say, I cannot tell people this enough. Um, do not, as silly as this might sound, if a dog is fearful or you're trying to elicit um, good intentions from a dog, I am a huge fan of practicing your tossing skills and tossing it towards the dog. The problem that happens when people give treats from their hands, while absolutely well intentioned, and I see it all the time, and this is why I say this, um, it can be a really conflicting scenario for a dog. Think about a dog that is super, super food motivated, absolutely wants that piece of cheese in their hand, but the scary person is looming over them and they have that piece of cheese in their hand, right? When we talk about trying to build up good associations between dogs and things that might be scary, like people, it kind of muddies the water when every time the dog is interacting to get that treat, to build up the good association, they're kind of feeling this unsettled feeling. So the beauty of tossing treats is, as I like to say, the scary person becomes like a pest dispenser, becomes like a human treat dispenser. Treats are raining from the sky, and the dog can control their interactions a little bit more, right? If they're behind an X pen, they can get closer to that person at the front of the exercise pen, or they can move away. They can decide to sniff out the treat on the ground. They're not forced into closer proximity just for the aspect of getting the treat. And so it makes a more pure association of, oh my God, delicious cheese rains from the sky and people are around. I kind of like having people around now because treats rain from the sky. And then Claire mentioned earlier about that kind of C-shaped behavior. This is a good kind of, drawing of this, where you're kind of seeing this like kind of like yin yang circling. Same thing when we want to approach as a human. Again, we are visual oriented people. We go face on, we approach, we give a handshake. That's not how dogs engage. And so if you're going to engage with a dog, kind of go at the side, right? Go at the side, maybe crouch down. You don't want to give a full back because obviously you want to be aware of the dog's, vibes and the situation around you. But you want to approach again, basically turning your body like a C. That's really key. And it's going to help a dog feel comfortable. Okay. And then the last one. So again, we've kind of already touched on this, but this is keeping others safe, right? And we alluded to it, respect your dog's personal bubble, right? So this is key when we get to this idea of the passing behavior. If your dog is comfortable on its bed, on its couch, anything like that, we want to respect them in that area. So that means, especially if you have visitors coming over, if the dog is on the couch, that is no touch zone, right? The dog is on their bed. Sorry, I meant bed, not the couch. If the dog is on the dog bed, that's a no touch zone, potentially, if your dog is like that. Also, you can use things like physical barriers. I am a huge, huge fan, Claire is as well, of things like physical barriers that make it very, very clear to the human involved as well that this is the dog's safe space, right? So it could be the dog on the dog bed with an exercise pen around it, an extra layer of safety. If you know your dog is going to have the potential of potentially guarding their bed or protecting their space around them by like jumping up and potentially growling or fighting or nipping or any of that, a physical exercise pen around that is an easy way to stop that. And the dog can still potentially, even in our small environments, still be living in our internal space, right? They don't have to be locked away everywhere. You don't need to have 4 bedrooms in a yard to do any of this. Again, the tossing the treats, cannot recommend that enough. So if your dog is in that bed around an X pen or in a crate, your visitors are just kind of like practicing their treat throwing. It's a fun game. You could give your dog a food puzzle or a chew to occupy them. Obviously, if they have guarding history, we're going to try to manage that as well. But giving them something so that the whole experience is kind of paired with, oh my God, I love getting my food puzzle, or I love getting my bully stick. Again, reading the dog's body language throughout the visit. Dogs might be really, really apprehensive and hesitant when people are coming into the apartment. Think about all the things that happen. People are saying hi, there's high energy, there's usually a doorbell or knocking or people coming in. But that might dissipate over time, right? So you might not necessarily need to have your dog safe space or the dog in the X pen the whole time. It might just be around those big exit and entry moments. And also, especially if you are trying to have friends come over on a more regular basis and your dog is maybe hesitant, it might require multiple visits. Do not get defeated if your dog is not immediately pleased with a new person in your life after one visit. They need repeated exposures. They need good, positive repeated exposures over time. And the best way to do that is reading their body language and giving them the space that they need. Oh, look at us. We're so good for time. Okay. So then we're going to get to resources, and Claire can chime in again. We might be able to, my goodness, I'm really good at going ahead. Okay, so at the very top is the link to the DOH dog bites page that will also have, I believe, the vital signs on it at some point. I believe there are some updates to that. I broke this down to behavior resources. So some of those drawings that you saw are from a woman named Martha, and she operates what's called silent conversations. And she does these nice little write-ups with drawings about dog body language. There's a great YouTube video by actually a colleague of mine in California, and it's called the Petting Consent Video. And it's a nice 3-minute long video that kind of gives you a step-by-step of how to gauge if a dog is into your petting or not. Because fun fact, sometimes dogs will just sit there and doesn't necessarily mean that they are really engaged in the activity. Petting consent, we're looking for things like the dog stays there and like is like pawing at you or siding into you or nudging your face. Like that is showing dog engagement. Family pause, if you have friends or family or yourself that have kids or are navigating the potential of having dogs and kids, Family Pause is a great resource. They offer webinars. They have a whole whole resource page for different things. They have like coloring sheets for children. They also have their own Family Pause certified trainers that focus on doing in-person training sessions. Lily Chin is another great artist that does a lot of dog body language and dog related stuff. It's doggy drawings. Fun fact, if you do have cats, she does have cat body language as well. I actually saw that she came out with a snake one the other day, which I thought was really, really impressive. And then, of course, the great colleagues over at NYC ACC, they have their own behavior flyers as well. There's a link to that. And then there's trainer directories. So if you are in the ability of having an in-person trainer, obviously you're welcome at any point to reach out to Claire and myself if you want help in navigating that in-person help. But you're wanting to look for someone that is using positive reinforcement, non-aversive methods. And so these are 4 great options. There are certified applied animal behaviorists like myself. CAB means that they've had some PhD in animal behavior or biology or ethology. ACAB is they have a master's in an equivalent degree, and then they've had hands-on work. And then there's the Certification Council for Professional Dog Trainers. That's what Claire and I have our our certifications through. International Association of Animal Behavior Consultants, and the Karen Pryor Academy. So these are all kind of great options. We are very, very, very fortunate in the New York City area that there are a lot of, we have a really great density, relatively speaking, to the rest of the country for trainers. And one I failed to recognize, if your dog has separation anxiety, a lot of these people are cross-listed, but there's also the CSAT, and I will put it in the chat. Those are actually certified as separation anxiety trainer specialists. And the beauty of those is that inherently, because you don't want humans present, most of those are virtual. So you can actually do those training with trainers that are certified for that anywhere across the country. Okay, questions.
Well, thank you both so much. That was really great. I could listen to you both all night. I love learning about this. It's so interesting. And yeah, if there are any questions, if folks just want to put them in the chat.
Thank you, Claire.
I don't think we've seen any come in yet. Maybe you guys were so thorough, but we'll give it a second to see if people come up. I really find it to be true that that whole idea of, your own behavior influencing a dog's behavior too. You know, it's when you see people act very excited around dogs, and I know when I've had my dog, I'm like, yeah, please don't rile the dog up. Please don't. Please let's be calm. Let's be chill. We're getting some thank yous. Oh, and a question is coming in. We're getting a heads
The
up.
types, slow typer. I think one thing that Anamarie and I didn't include in this, I don't think that we thought it was necessary, but I feel like it is now, is the concept of stress stacking.
I was
I
thinking
mean,
the same thing, Claire.
oh my God, I know, of course you are. There's this concept, it's trigger stacking, stress stacking. Let me explain this in the human context. It's like a bad day, right? So you wake up late, you spill your coffee, you miss the subway, you haven't even gotten to work yet, and your colleague has called out and they're supposed to be doing a project with you. It's like, and it's 9:02 a.m. That happens with dogs, right? So, and dogs have certain triggers, right? The city is overwhelming with stimuli, right? We all know this, right? Some days we don't hear the squealing brakes on the buses, but some days we do, and it really bothers us, right? And so we have to remember that with dogs, and often this goes with like some of the scenarios we were talking about, like going to the farmer's market, right? So say you go to Central Park and you're off leash, with your dog for like an hour. It's a lot of fun, but it's still stress. Stress isn't always bad, right? You can have eustress and it still creates a lot of hormones in the body. And then you go from Central Park and you go to a farmer's market on the Upper West Side, straight from there, and it's crowded and chaotic and the dog is tired, right? So the dog is a little bit more fragile and a little bit more prone to kind of be reactive to things that they may have not been reactive if they hadn't ran around for an hour and a half. You know what I mean? And so we have to think about those things in terms of what is going on for your dog. Same thing for having guests over, right? If you have one person come over, for dinner, it's a little bit calmer than having 8 people come over for, like a game of charades or something like that, where it's just everybody gets a little bit more riled up, right? So that noise and that sound and that activity can stack for dogs. And it's just important to kind of think about that again, thinking about the environment, that the dog is currently occupying and what happened before, that day or the day before, right? So if you went to the groomer in the morning and then you have a dinner party in the evening, that dog has been stress stacking throughout the day, right?
I'm just going to share a link in the chat that Anamarie
Yes.
was.
So for the tossing treats, that's a good question, and Claire can and time on that. So the question was, if you're tossing treats on the ground, does that instill an undesired behavior of eating off the floor or the ground? Theoretically, yes. And what you can do, and what we will often do, is what we call a behavior called like find it. So essentially, you can start this inside your home environment, and if you're not comfortable with your dog eating off the ground outside, that I totally agree with. Usually people are a little bit more comfortable about the tossing the treats in the environment of their home. But if your dog has a high propensity of eating treats off the ground, kind of, or eating things off the ground willy-nilly, you can do something called like a find it behavior, which is essentially you would toss the treats on the ground, your dog starts kind of hunting for them, and you say find it. So then it becomes a cued behavior. And a lot of times when it's a cued behavior, dogs won't necessarily be doing it willy-nilly. That would be kind of my recommendation. I don't know if Claire has another one.
No, I mean, I think that's, I get that question all the time. So let's just start at the very beginning. Dogs are natural scavengers, right? That's just who they are, right? And so that is part of that is they already have that propensity, right? So do we want them doing that in the city? Absolutely not. It's disgusting. So putting it on cue, right? Using a find it cue and putting it on cue, turning it into an actual behavior that you can cue is one way to be like, okay, now you can go get this particular treat that I just tossed on the ground, right? And then building up that leave it cue is different, right? That's a different behavior. So you're asking your dog to leave something on the ground as opposed to go get something on the ground, right? So in our minds, we kind of squish it all together, but if you deliberately train those two behaviors separately, the dog is going to understand that.
And then there was another question about the dog sensing that someone is afraid of dogs. Very, very common question. And a lot of times this goes to this idea of like, oh, my dog can like read vibes and stuff. There's no research on that. I think what the dog is reading, because dogs are keyed to read our body language, even though we humans are not keyed to read our body language, is the idea that, going back to what Claire talked about the tense versus safe, your dog is reading that a scared person of dogs is probably really, really stiff. And so they're probably like, what the heck is this person doing? This person is really, really stiff. Normally, when people approach me, they're a little bit looser. So I think that's probably what they're picking up on. So we conflate it all together by saying, oh, they're reading our vibes, they're reading our energy, and it's really just they're reading our body language. And that's why you see dogs pick up on kind of behaviors, that things that we never train them. Like, I used to joke, and I trained my dogs to go run for their food bowl when I shut off the television, because I did a PM snack before bed, and the trigger cue was the inadvertent turning off of the television sound. So dogs pick up on things that we're not picking up on or haven't
And now we
deliberately
know how
trained.
dog trainers have fun.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Thank you for that.
No
Thanks,
problem.
thanks. Interrupting. Yeah, I just want to add one thing to that also. Certainly the posturing of someone that's afraid of a dog or afraid of something, they tend to be tense, right? But also it's that direct stare. Um, anyone that I see it happen all the time on the street where someone is like is nervous around dogs. They do the absolute worst thing to do, which is stare at a dog. And so that goes back to, what does that mean to the dog, right? If someone is staring at them, right, with tension in their body, that is somewhat threatening to a dog. And so sometimes it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy for the person who's afraid of dogs, because then a dog perhaps may react to that, because it's like, whoa, this person's creeping me out a little bit. So they may bark at them. And then they're like, and then, and then you have this like this vicious cycle of, see, I knew it.
So if someone is I know we're at time, but really quickly, just if someone is afraid of dogs and they pass by a dog on the street, are there any tips for what they could do, or it's out of their hands, or
I would say just, kind of what,
give them space?
yeah, everything that we were talking about,
Yeah.
right? Give the dog some space, I see that often. I kind of know when people are a little bit nervous around my dog, and I have a fluffy Australian Shepherd, so she's not your typical like dog that most people are afraid of, but they still will kind of just give a wide berth, which I appreciate. And if they do that, I will actually match it and usually curve a little bit as well, mostly to protect my dog, because I know that that person is staring at my dog, and I don't want my dog to kind of pick up on that and be like, well, that person's staring at me. So I'll kind of match it and do that, kind of like just create some distance
And
from.
I will say, and I say this kind of jokingly, but I say this kind of not jokingly, I would actually just use your body language to create space, rather than saying like, I'm scared of dogs, because I would bet 50% of the time, if not more, the person would be like, my dog loves all people. They're totally fine, which may or may not be correct in how we read our dog's body language. So, as much as that might be advocating for yourself, I think just being quiet and moving away is probably the better option.
All right. Well, I don't see any more questions, and we're at time. So I just want to thank you again to Claire and Anna Marie. It was so kind and generous of you to volunteer your time and create this presentation, make tonight possible. I really
No problem.
appreciate it. Thank you also. Yeah, no, so grateful for all you're doing. And thank you
Awesome.
to everybody for attending. We will, as I think was mentioned earlier, be updating on the NYC Health website, the dog bite page, but I did put a link to the page in the chat, so check back soon for updates. And then we'll also have, I think if I did this as I planned, hopefully a survey will pop up when you leave. If you could fill that out, that would be great. It's optional. We appreciate your feedback. And Anamarie, Claire, I don't know if you have any final words, but if not, we'll just say
Thank you all for coming.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you everyone for making the time to kind of I don't know, listen.
thanks so much, everyone. Good night.
Night.
Night.